broadcast. Good afternoon. My name is Attorney Malik Shabazz, and I am the lead counsel for Mr. Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. And I'm also an attorney that's fighting for Damian Cameron, whose mother, Monica Lee, is with us. I'm happy to be here with Mississippi Council for Black Lawyers for Justice, the hard-fighting attorney Trent Walker, who is the Mississippi local counsel with me, honorably, for the Michael Jenkins, Eddie Parker case against Rankin County. Attorney Trent Walker is also the lead county as he stepped in the civil case for Miss Monica Lee for the death of Damian Cameron, which occurred in July of 2021. And I am his assistant in that case. And we are here to briefly and get right to the point to respond specifically today to the news that Brian Bailey has finally taken action to fire 5 of the deputies that were involved in the torture case and the shooting case of Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. We all have heard the allegations or heard what had happened in pieces. I'm not going to take a long time today to rehash all of the very important allegations, and I will not make light of them shortly. But they are all contained in our 49-page, $400 million civil suit against Rankin County. And we affirm today that Brian Bailey has made even an inch of progress is because under his leadership, one of the worst occurrences of police brutality, an ordeal which sets the standard for police misconduct, occurred under the supervision and the so-called watch of Sheriff Brian Bailey. We are affirming that today one of the worst incidents is now coming to light. It occurred under the leadership of this sheriff. And also the tragic death of Damian occurred under this same department. 21. We're going to get into it, get right to what you need fast while these internet connections are working. But I do want to point you all out to page 41 of our 49-page civil suit, page 41 of which is in count 194. I'm sorry to the press and to others who know these documents are detailed, but every word, every page, every count is very important when you're dealing with a strong fight against a county that has historically escaped liability. So let me read this and then we're going to move forward. You're going to hear from Michael Jenkins' mother. You're going to see Michael Jenkins is here. I believe Eddie Parker is here. We want to thank also joining with us the family spokeswoman for the state of Mississippi. Her name is Miss Priscilla Teal. Miss Priscilla Williams Teal, the family spokesperson who's advocating, helping, and speaking out for Michael Jenkins, Eddie Parker, Monica Lee, and the family, and also national activist John Barnett here, should be on the line from North Carolina, the nationally known civil rights activist that will be at Rankin County on July 5th. We'll get right back to that. I'm hoping we have Mr. Markel Bridges here, who is the lead activist, leading on the ground anti-police brutality activist in the state of Mississippi and other areas. And I'm also here, before I get started, to bring you greetings from the leader of the NAACP in Rankin County, Miss Angela English, who sends us strong greetings of support. And the Rankin County NAACP will be issuing a statement this week about Brian Bailey's announcement. And let me tell you as we get started, they are not satisfied, as we are not satisfied, and these families are not satisfied until justice has been done. Let's get right to the pleadings, and then we'll get right to our guests, and then we'll open up for the press, because I know you all have questions, so I won't be too long today. Okay, so, but we say here on page 41, count 194, 195, we charge Brian Bailey with violating federal law. We say that Brian Bailey in our lawsuit has failed to train, failed to supervise his deputies, and failed to discipline his deputies. And Brian Bailey's failure to train them, failure to supervise them, failure to hold his deputies accountable are the proximate cause of the injuries and the damages sustained by Michael Jenkins, Eddie Parker, and Damian Cameron on the dates that they were attacked by the Rankin County deputies. I'm sorry, Mr. Brian Bailey, but your firing of the 5 deputies who tortured and shot Michael Jenkins and who tortured Eddie Parker and who ultimately killed Damian Cameron, that your firing of these deputies, Brian Bailey, is too little too late. You should have long ago have fired these deputies even before Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker were attacked, and this incident would never have occurred. This ordeal, this torture, this 2-hour nightmare occurred, Mr. Brian Bailey, is because you have failed to discipline your officers, failed to hold accountable. You even participated with your officers, including the notorious Hunter Elwood, as we point out in our lawsuit on page 13. You have absolutely participated with Hunter Elwood in acts of excessive force, and therefore it's too little too late. Brian Bailey, you have only stepped up to take action because the Department of Justice is all over the Rankin County Sheriff's Department and its officers for their wrongdoing. And even the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation has come against you now for the conduct of the deputies under your command. And we know that State Attorney Lynn Fitch right now, that the ball is in her court, and we're expecting her to act to levy criminal charges against these 6 deputies, really 6 deputies. We're expecting State Attorney General Lynn Fitch to levy criminal charges, serious criminal charges against these deputies right away if there's justice in the state of Mississippi. But only because of the MBI, only because of the Department of Justice, and only because of the vigorous advocacy of the persons who are on this line, Black Lawyers for Justice, and the other advocates who have been fighting and speaking up for this cause, including the courageous Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, and Miss Lee and Miss Mary Jenkins. That's the reason we're here today. So again, in the lawsuit, we charge, to conclude, we charge, just so you'll have a reference, you can get this from our staff who emailed you this, you can have the lawsuit, you can have the copy of our submissions to the United States Department of Justice. We charge specifically that this is Brian Bailey's fault, and occurring for a long time, and it's documented, and it's Brian Bailey's fault. Brian Bailey, the sheriff, did not apologize to the family yesterday. Brian Bailey did not express any remorse to Michael Jenkins, to Eddie Parker, to Monica Lee yesterday. Brian Bailey, the sheriff, did not even name the deputies who he dismissed. He did not even have the dignity or the professional courtesy to name the 5 deputies who he dismissed. Well, why was it 5 and not 6? I'll let Attorney Trent Walker tell you why it was only 5 and not 6, but there were 6 deputies in the house. Why would Bailey only hire 5? And who is the 6? I'll let him answer that. Attorney Trent Walker, who is born in Rankin County and knows about the blood and the brutality of Rankin County. And so if you were also members of the press, if you have the civil law student, here's Brian Bailey. He won't tell you the officers, but we will. Here's Brian Bailey. We say that he is barely coming into the range of justice with his actions. He would not tell you that Hunter Elwood was one of the men he fired, and Hunter Elwood is the deputy we say placed his gun inside of Michael Jenkins' mouth and held it and intentionally fired and intended to murder Michael Jenkins. Brian Bailey wouldn't tell you that this was Hunter Elwood. He wouldn't tell you that, but we will. Brian Bailey would not tell you why when he gives out information to the press and to the lawyers, that he gives them from his department and his leadership solid evidence of a cover-up and a pattern and practice of covering up. These are the taser reports, all covered up. What are you hiding, Brian Bailey? What are you hiding, Brian Bailey? What are you hiding? He would not tell you. I'm getting off of here, moving as fast as I can, because you know these facts are all important to me. These are your incident reports, Brian Bailey, all blacked out. What are you hiding, Sheriff Bailey? Brett McAlpin, he won't tell you, but we will, that McAlpin was fired. And according to our plaintiff, Brett McAlpin was the supervisor and the ringleader of it all on that day. I'm going to put a pin in it at this point with what I have said. And I would like to, at this point, to bring on Attorney Trent Walker. Attorney Trent Walker on.
Good evening.
And I do want Attorney Trent Walker on, and he will speak to us, and then we will bring on Miss Mary Jenkins for her response to what Brian Bailey has done, and we will bring on Miss Monica Lee, who represents her son, Damian Cameron, to give her take, and then we're going to get into questions and answers, and our great activist helpers, they're going to jump right in. Go right ahead, Attorney Honorable Trent Walker.
Thank you so much, Attorney Shabazz. Again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trent Walker. I am local counsel for, excuse me, for Eddie Parker, as well as Michael Jenkins in their case against the Rankin County Sheriff's Department and the 3 named deputies, as well as 3 unnamed deputies, which I'll get to in a second. I'm also counsel for Miss Monica Lee, who is present, who's the mother of Damian Cameron, who was also murdered by Hunter Elwood.
Kind of breaking up a little bit, Attorney.
Okay, we'll do the best we can. And my voice, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm a little hoarse, so just bear with me. But I'm also counsel for Miss Monica Lee, whose son Damian Cameron was also murdered by Hunter Elwood in a previous incident in July of 2021, for which we are bringing suit and hoping to, and not hoping, we will get justice for her and her family, as well as for Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Parker. So I want to touch on a couple of things. As has been stated by Attorney Shabazz earlier, I am a native of Rankin County, Mississippi. I graduated from Pearl High School in 1986. And so I know very well about the history of justice and injustice in Rankin County. And what I can tell you is that the way that this department has gone operationally, they've been doing the same thing for the last 50 or 60 years or longer, certainly all of my lifetime. The second thing that I want to say with specificity with regard to this case, there is still a cover-up going on at this point. And we're happy that Brian Bailey came out and fired the officers in this investigation, but it leaves us with some questions. Question number one, why did he decline to name who he fired? You just come out and say who you fired, that you fired, without saying who you fired. And one of the things that we want to avoid in this case is for Rankin County and the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to go out and hire 6 officers that look just like the 5 that they just fired, and who have the same attitude as the ones that they just got rid of. Because otherwise, you're in a situation where it's like, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Nothing changes if the people you bring in to replace the officers that you fired have the same attitude and the same course of conduct as the officers that you did deign to get rid of. Secondly, as Attorney Shabazz said earlier, we've been very clear, and our clients have been very clear with us, that there were 6 deputies in the house that night. According to what Brian Bailey said yesterday, that 5 people had either resigned or been fired without naming any of those 5. So that means that there's an officer who has not been accounted for, who apparently is still in the employ of either the Rankin County Sheriff's Department or some other department. And so we're, first of all, calling on the Rankin County Sheriff's Department and Brian Bailey to release the names of everybody who was involved that night. Because if they were involved enough for you to fire, then there's no reason to keep covering for them by failing to release their names and thus allowing them to go get a job with some other law enforcement agency to carry out the same things that they've been doing. Secondly, when we say what happened to officer number 6, we do not have it definitively, but there is some indication that officer number 6 may have been a member of another force other than the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. We've not confirmed that, so I don't want to speak to that. However, there is some indication that that might be the case. Couple other things that Brian Bailey made note of in terms of their trying to reform the department. And certainly there's a lot of reform that's needed. The first thing he said, that they've hired a compliance officer, and the hiring of a compliance officer suggests that you had issues with compliance with policy before all this happened. And again, we don't represent the Woods family, the Pierre Woods family, but you can look at that particular case, which also involved Brian Bailey, Hunter Elwood, and other officers. But you can look at that case where Judge Henry Wingate denied qualified immunity to Brian Bailey and to those officers. There's video that shows that you're not allowed to bring someone into custody by shooting them to death. And that is what happened in the Pierre Woods case with Brian Bailey on the scene. Hunter Elwood is on record as saying that he fired at Pierre Woods 8 times. Excuse me. On record as saying that he fired at Pierre Woods 8 times. Hunter Elwood is on record as saying that when he encountered Damian Cameron, that he punched him about the face with his closed fist on multiple occasions, and that he used his taser on him. Of course, Damian Cameron died that night. And if you look at the pictures of his face to the back of Miss Jenkins, Miss Lee, and Miss Priscilla Williams, you'll see his eyes are swollen shut, his face is beaten bloody. And that was done by Hunter Elwood and another officer on the scene that night. That officer being one Luke Stickman, who's named in the lawsuit against the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. And we specifically named Officer Stickman as well as Hunter Elwood. Said all that to say, you have a long history of compliance issues. Attorney Shabazz showed you the taser records. All that stuff that's blacked out is redacted because they determined before they ever turned those records over that everything that's blacked out is a part of this particular investigation. You have 6 pages of taser records with big blocks blacked out. That suggests that your tasers were being used over and over again. And if you look at the time on that, those tasers were being used over the course of an hour. So why it's necessary? Well, it's not a question of why it's necessary. It's totally unnecessary to start with, because you enter the house without a warrant, and you enter the house for the purpose of torturing these young men who were in the house. And that's what they carried out, and they culminated in shooting Michael Jenkins in the mouth. And you knew, talking about compliance issues, you knew that nobody was overseeing body cams. I believe I saw it reported on WLBT last night that Brett McAlpin had not had his body cam on for the entire month of January, if I recall correctly. Nobody's keeping up with body cam. If they had a policy, nobody's enforcing the policy. And it's those things that allow for officers to go renegade and to go carry out torture sessions with no record of them, because there's nothing to record the encounters that they have with citizens, even though they are department issued body cams. And that encourages them to go and carry out the things that they carried out and commit the atrocities that have been committed in this case and in other cases. Other question we want to ask is, what is it about this particular case that took 5 months for you to decide that it was time to fire these officers? There is nothing, you look at the case up in Memphis, I believe that they had released the video, fired the officers, and police chief resigned all within the course of a month. I think the video was released and the officers were fired, placed under arrest within 11 days, if I recall correctly. Here we've gone 5 months, when the night that everything happened, the basic facts were known by the sheriff's department. They knew that night that Hunter Elwood had shot Michael Jenkins in the mouth. They knew that there is no reason under God's green earth for any officer to ever place his weapon inside the mouth of any human being. They knew that night. The other thing that they knew, and Attorney Shabazz again showed you the blacked out incident report, they knew that incident report was falsified. They knew that there was no gun that Michael Jenkins had. They knew that night. They started covering up that night. They charged Michael Jenkins with felony assault on a law enforcement officer, with felony drug possession. They knew that night that those charges were made specifically to cover up what they had done to Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. After that, they kept him under armed guard in a hospital, being guarded by deputies of the Rankin County Sheriff's Department, refusing to give his mother any medical information, otherwise make contact with him, and then ultimately forcing them to pay a $50,000 bond in order to get that deputy out of the hospital room. So they made this family pay money on these false charges. And all of this is a continuation of that cover-up. And so, final thing, and I see that Attorney Shabazz wants to step back.
Attorney Walker?
Yes, sir. Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hold right there. You're doing an excellent job. But I want to make sure that the video Wi-Fi connection and out there in Rankin County, or out there in the county, Rankin County, that it doesn't go out. But hold right there, because we got some more points you have to make. Okay.
Okay.
Quickly, while we got this internet connection working, Attorney Trent Walker is giving us strong history here. Miss Jenkins and Miss Lee, can you all hear me? Miss Mary Jenkins and Miss Monica Lee, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, members of the press and those activists that are watching, we're gonna hear now, before, then we'll open up and get further into it, because there may be a body cam. We'll talk about that. This other officer, we'll talk about that. There are many things to talk about, but let's try to get some opening information here. Miss Mary Jenkins is the mother of Michael Jenkins. She's been with us from the beginning, and she has been very strong in the support and the care of her son, supporting the fight for justice and caring for Michael Jenkins through his very trying recovery. Miss Monica Lee here has been fighting for justice for Damian Cameron for a couple of years now. And finally, people are starting to recognize that when she says in her affidavit that those Rankin County deputies had their knee on the back of Damian Cameron's neck long after he stopped moving and breathing, that their knees were on his neck, people are starting to take her affidavit in the lawsuit seriously now. But we'll come to her, because it's now the Jenkins case is helping to shed light on the Damian Cameron death, that it was other than what has been stated. But we'll let her and Attorney Walker get into that. Ms. Jenkins, could you tell the members of the press what is your reaction to Brian Bailey firing 5 of his deputies on yesterday? What would be your reaction, ma'am?
First of all, I'd like to thank the Attorney General and the FBI and the Justice Department for helping with this case. What I think about it is it's not enough to fire those deputies, because all that they'll do is go to another police department and get on and do the same thing. I want them prosecuted, and I don't want them to be able to work it under any authority or any police department in the state of Mississippi, because they'll just go from one department to another doing the same identical thing. And we don't need these people governing anybody. They're here to protect and serve, but who is going to protect us from them? Because as a Black woman who have children, I fear for my children every time they leave the house that they might be stopped by a police officer. So these officers need to be prosecuted, and that they need to be put out of the police force, never to work at another police department, because they are unfit. Anybody that can do that to my son and Miss Cameron's son, you know, they treated our children as if they were not even human. So these people cannot be rehabilitated. They are what they are, and we don't need them on any police force in the United States. I also like to thank
you so much, Miss Mary Jenkins, for making that statement. Can I ask you, Miss Jenkins, do you believe that Brian Bailey should continue on as the sheriff of Rankin County, Mississippi?
No, I don't. He needs to resign, and really, he needs to be prosecuted, because these men are working under him, and in some cases, alongside him when they're doing these things. So he's unfit to be a sheriff, a deputy, or anything in the police department, because the buck stops with him. Whatever these police are doing, he has to answer for it. And in this case, to me, it seemed like he knew and he was just being complacent in it. So no, he needs to go. It's not enough for him to resign. He needs to be held accountable.
Miss Mary Jenkins. Let's turn the camera, if we can, to Miss Monica Lee, who was the mother of Damian Cameron, who lost his life with Rankin Deputy Luke Stickman and Hunter Elward in the summer of 2021. Can we bring her in, Miss Monica Lee, or Miss Priscilla, can we focus on Miss Lee? I don't know if Michael Jenkins is there also. Is Michael with you all today?
He's in another room. Okay. We can get him.
Oh, at least I know he's not going to.
I can get it.
Bring him in and let him have a seat next to his mom, please. But Miss Lee,
Need to bring the rest.
Miss Monica Lee,
Yes, sir.
you have been standing and protesting and complaining for a long time with little progress. What do you say, Miss Monica Lee, mother of Damian Cameron, about Sheriff Brian Bailey firing 5 of the deputies in the Jenkins and Parker case yesterday? What do you say, ma'am?
It's just like Miss Mary Jenkins said, that's not enough. They need to be prosecuted. Because they took my child's life. Michael survived. Had he got rid of them when they killed my son, it wouldn't have never happened to Michael. So, and that with him resigning, he don't need to resign. He needs to be fired because it starts at the head down.
That's right.
Okay. So you're saying that Bailey needs to be forced out of office, and if they would have dealt with your son with justice, this never would have happened to Michael Jenkins. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
And me as a mother.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the... Yes.
Me as a mother, for you to just come to my house and just say you were there to talk to my son, he's walking and well, but before they leave, my child is dead. No, that's not acceptable.
Yes,
So,
ma'am. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the press, you have heard our opening statement, so I'm going to open it up to you all, but our position is clear. We're not satisfied with Brian Bailey's actions. They have come too late. And we are all firm that justice here is the criminal prosecution of the Rankin deputies involved in the Michael Jenkins case, of which one involved in the Damian Cameron case. We are demanding that Hunter Elwood, Brett McAlpin, Christian Deadman, and the other deputies be indicted and placed behind bars. We are demanding their indictment. Here we have Mr. Michael Jenkins is here, also with us, sitting next to Miss Lee. We're demanding criminal prosecution. We want to say as much as we can say about that. And the only thing that we can say about that is that we believe that the Department of Justice is taking this case seriously on the highest level. That on the highest levels in Washington and in the Southern District of Mississippi, the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Justice, according to our meetings with them, is taking this case very, very seriously. Okay? And yes, sorry. It sounds shocking to me when I first heard it, but Attorney Walker and I and all of us have stuck with it. And all that we said in our lawsuit, members of the press, it's coming to light that this was a horrific action against these young men while handcuffed, that it was done on the basis of race, that they were using the N-word, they were calling them niggas throughout this whole ordeal, that these men were beaten repeatedly for over an hour and a half. They were tased repeatedly over an hour and a half. They were waterboarded. They were surrounded, pinned down, and waterboarded. That a sexual assault attempts were made on these men. that they were forced to strip naked and shower together, and that Michael Jenkins was in fact shot in the mouth by Hunter Elwood, one of the deputies that were fired. It's true. And we demand justice. And justice is these officers going behind bars for a long, long time. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we will allow you to answer questions at this point, and then we will bring in our activists. Can you adjust the camera for a moment to show Michael Jenkins and his mother, please, Miss Priscilla? And then we'll let the members of the press, you all can open up. How you doing, Mr. Michael? Thank you, sir.
Hi, Mr.
Members
Shabazz.
of the press, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Michael Goldberg with the Associated Press.
Can you all speak up a little louder?
Hi, this is Michael Goldberg with the Associated Press. This question is for either Mr. Shabazz or Mr. Walker. Can you speak to the status of either the Mississippi Bureau, the MBI investigation, and the investigation, and whether or not you think that some new development in either of those investigations led to this spate of firings?
We can barely hear you.
We can hear. We heard the question. The question was is there, to paraphrase, was there some new development in the MBI, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, inquiry into this case, which was the cause behind Brian Bailey's actions? I will let Attorney Walker answer that question.
Well, acting on incomplete information, just on what we know based on our involvement in this case, it had been clear for a while that at least the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations inquiry was coming to an end. And of course, Rankin County is not allowed to investigate itself. So the investigation was turned over to Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. And so I can presume that that investigation had concluded, and basically, based on what they learned from that investigation, they went ahead and instigated the termination of these officers. Having said that, as I said earlier, as the leader of a department and his immediate undersheriffs and supervisors, they knew that night, or at least the morning after, that something was rotten in Denmark with regard to the way that this case is being reported. And they knew that everything that was being said was a cover-up. Because, and the reason I say that, there is no logical explanation as to why that gun was fired inside of Michael's mouth. And there's no justification for ever putting the gun in his mouth. Everything that goes from there, whether you're claiming you saw a gun, your reaction is not to stick your gun in his mouth. Everybody knows that. That's just common sense. The sheriff knew that, and all the actions they took immediately afterwards, including allowing these officers to remain on duty. I understand at some point they were placed on administrative leave, but they remained on duty for some amount of time when you knew that they were lying and they were involved in a cover-up. So we can presume MBI's investigation has concluded, and that's what directly led to the firing of these officers at this time. But there was no reason that they had to wait in order to do that when you knew enough going in that you could have fired these officers. We're at this point where there's criminal investigation going on, and that investigation is not of Michael Jenkins or Eddie Parker. That investigation is of these officers.
And Mr. Walker, one quick follow-up. The sheriff mentioned an internal investigation in his comments yesterday. What did you make of that, this idea that there's an internal investigation as well?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the sheriff's department, but it would only make sense that they at least look into whether or not their written policies and procedures were being followed. And again, we know based on reporting and based on what's been available through freedom of information requests, that these guys turned the body cams on and off when they felt like it. We know that they were using these tasers with abandon because they were not really up to that point concerned about being disciplined for the use of those tasers. It was the shooting of Michael that brought everything to light. You know, otherwise, there's a substantial chance that this would have been business as usual for the way that these officers operate.
Okay, so on that one point, Associated Press. Okay, so we first of all, I want to recognize the MBI. MBI first came to us sincerely and said that if there was any criminal wrongdoing in the case of Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker by law enforcement officers, that they were going to pursue it, and that they will go, and that these victims would have justice. Normally, we would not let a client of ours talk to a law enforcement agency, specifically after these false criminal charges were placed on them. But we did allow them to interview with the MBI. And we are a reason to believe right now that the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation has come against these deputies, that it's adverse to these deputies. And therefore, that places the ball in the lap of the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi now to act. And we expect her to act on behalf of her constituents. Any follow-up, Miss, on the Associated Press, or we move to another reporter? I don't know if CNN is on today. They were invited. They asked. I don't know if they're on, but you all are welcome to ask your questions.
I think Kayla Jimenez from ABC has posted a question in the chat.
Okay. Do you want to read the question, or would she like to articulate it?
I can say the question. Hi again, my name is Nikayla Carter with ABC News. I wanted to just ask if the charges were ever dropped that were brought upon Parker and Jenkins, and then just wanted to see how Jenkins was doing and see if he can speak now. Not speak
Okay,
like now, but like is he able to speak?
The charges, I'll tell you, I will give you an answer to that. The charges have not been dropped, nor have they been pursued. They have not been dropped. When Hunter Elwood fabricated an affidavit of criminal charges against Michael Jenkins, they forced a bond to be paid just for the family to see Michael Jenkins. Since then, no criminal charges have been pursued, and we never expected criminal charges to be pursued because all along we were saying that the criminal charges were a cover-up. Okay, on Michael Jenkins speaking, Mr. Jenkins is not going to speak because as attorneys, and Michael Jenkins is going to be a witness in the civil case, and he has to testify at depositions, that he will not be making statements. And also, he is likely to be a witness for the Department of Justice. And therefore, he will not be making any statements. But if you can shift the camera over, Miss Priscilla, I'd like you to see him, because his mother from ABC, his mother is going to tell you, no, shift it the other way.
No, that's Eddie Parker.
That's his mother is going to tell you exactly how he has been doing since she arrived at that hospital and what she has had to endure since then. Go right ahead, Miss Mary.
Michael has been having from the time he left the hospital has been when I first saw him in CCU, he was unconscious, and I could only hold his hand and talk to him. He was on a ventilator, They had him hand shackled and they had his legs shackled. And he was on a ventilator and he was not even conscious. My husband and I were allowed to see him one at a time. We couldn't go in together and we had to give up our phone. So when they put him on the ward, when they put him on in a room, took him out of CCU, I got to see him one time before the Rankin County Police said I could no longer see him. Me and my husband, either one, could see him. And when I finally got to see him, I had to bail him out on a $50,000 bond because the officers from the same department that put him in the hospital was in his room. He had a guard on him 24/7. Someone was in the room with him. And that concerned me because Michael had a trach, he had a feeding tube, and he could not speak. So you can imagine how he felt when he had to wake up every morning and see the officers from the same department that did this to him sitting over there, and he was not allowed, he could not speak. So if either one of them did anything, I'm not saying they did, he wouldn't even be able to call out for help. My son could not, we had to crush his medicine, put it on a syringe, put juice in and put it in his mouth. We had to give him cream soup. That's what he could eat, applesauce and cream soup. And I also had to put it on a syringe and just squirt it in his mouth because part of his mouth and his face was paralyzed. So he couldn't control his tongue. His tongue was, the doctors told me, was hanging on by a slitter. The bullet went all the way across the tongue and it just was hanging on. So therefore they had to stitch his tongue together. The bullet severed an artery. He was bleeding to death. And the doctor who called from the University Hospital told me that they had been trying to reach me all day from that morning. I had given all my information to Rankin County. One called, a deputy called me and asked me, was Michael allergic to anything? That was 5 o'clock. I told him no. And so by 6 o'clock, they still hadn't told the doctor. The doctor was waiting to do surgery on Michael because the doctor said as fast as they were putting blood in him, he was bleeding it out because the artery had to be closed. And so they still hadn't contacted the doctor. So the doctor finally called me and asked me, was Michael allergic to anything? And they were taking him into surgery to repair the artery because he was bleeding out. They were giving him blood and he was bleeding it out. And then 2 hours later, another set of doctors had to go in and repair his tongue and his shattered jaw. His jaw had to be wired shut. So therefore, the only side of his mouth that was working was the left side, and we had to put his medicine in a syringe. We had to put his food in a syringe. When he tried to eat something, and later on, he would just almost go down on the table because it was so much pain. He would hold his jaw, and it was so much pain. He was having nightmares. We had to put Michael in the living room on the couch with the lights on, and he would still wake up in a sweat over what the police officer did to him. And that lasted for a while, and it also lasted for a while. Now he had to see a psychiatrist. He had to see a doctor for his teeth, for his mouth. He had to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. He had to see a speech doctor to try to get his speech better because of paralyzation on his side of his face. He couldn't talk plain. So all of this, although some of it's getting better, he's still bothered with the pain in his jaw. It is almost, like I said, sometimes it's almost unbearable. So these things with Michael is going to last forever. And some of the things we might get over in a year and a half, the doctor said, but some of them will be permanent. And so this is what he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. And I do believe that the Rankin County Police Department was trying to wait till Michael died. The reason they wouldn't give the doctor my information, they were hoping that he would bleed out. But by the grace of God, he survived. So these deputies seen that Michael, when he would tell me about it, he would just break down and cry over the things that they did to him. So these people are not human, and they're not treating people, especially people of color. They don't even look at these people as being human. So that's why they can do these things. That's why they can come in there and beat people stomp them, throw eggs at them, do all these things because they don't consider these people. My child, Miss Cameron's son, Terrell, they don't consider them being human. And know these police should not ever work at another police department. And Brian Bailey,
Yes, ma'am.
put in jail.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Is WBLT Jackson there? I know you calling originally for a question.
Yes, I'm Quentin Smith. I'm here. So one question I was wanting to ask Mr. Shabazz and Mr. Walker, just what are your reactions to the fact that the sheriff read off a prepared statement yesterday, but didn't take any questions from the media so we could get more specifics about the investigation and about the deputies that were fired?
Can you allow me to do this? We want to answer that, but in context. Let me let another person with experience that knows Brian Bailey, Markel Bridges. Let me just let him have a word in. Mr. Bridges.
Thank you,
When you
Mr.
saw Brian Bailey, when you saw Sheriff Bailey read his prepared statement dismissing those officers, what is your response from Mississippi's leading, police brutality activists?
That they were trying to save face. All of the dark past coming to light through Michael Jenkins. First of all my love to Mr. Jenkins and Miss Mary. Love y'all. You looking good, Mike. That hospital photo, so I to be strong, but do the right thing. His hand has been forced through Mr. Shabazz, through Mr. Trent Walker, doing all their due diligence and following up through the DOJ and the FBI. So he has no choice in the matter anymore. But he had no concern for Michael Jenkins, for his life. He had no regard of holding the officers accountable. He's simply going through the motions of what he have to do to save face for the department.
Okay, Miss Priscilla Williams from the Emmett Till family, another family spokesman, along with Mr. Bridges. You are very experienced with Mississippi. When you saw Brian Bailey read his prepared statement, what is your response, ma'am? What is your response? Turn the camera a little bit towards you, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The issue with what happened with Michael and
Lean
Eddie,
in a little bit. Lean into the camera a little bit. Thank you. Go ahead. Just lean in.
The issue here in the state of Mississippi is white supremacy, and that's what no one is talking about. No one is talking about the Mississippi has the most white supremacist organizations in the state. In the United States, not just Mississippi, but in the United States. And no one is willing to talk about that, hit on those key points, because if you have our attorney general, whose dad was the corporate sponsor for Nathan Bedford Forrest home, and he turned it into a resort, and you have white corporate businessmen at a Grand Ku Klux Wizards home that was recreated and is used as a resort here in the state now, who do you think our sheriffs are? Who do you think are our police officers that did this to Michael and Eddie Parker or Damon Cameron, and along with others here, their case have not been brought to the forefront, which will be here recently. We have a lot of issues here in the state of Mississippi, and it is about white supremacists in positions of leadership. And that's the reason why you don't hear these cases on the outside of the state of Mississippi, unless we reach out to others outside the state, like the Department of Justice, Black Lawyers Association, like Dr. Malik Shabazz and Trent Walker get in this case. Because believe me, there are other cases supersede Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker right here in this state, like Rasheem Carter. So I'm just hoping the news channel, the news stations, if you are listening, there are documented facts about the racist organizations and the many members that belong to that organization, which are in our legislators, which are our mayors, which are our police officers. If someone was to come here and do an oversight of what's wrong with the state of Mississippi, what you would see, what we're dealing with is the white supremacy structure here in this state that allows Brian Bailey not to have arrested or kicked these police officers out the force because of the white supremacy, because of the brotherhood. The brotherhood wouldn't allow him to mess with his deputies. So until the government, the Department of Justice deal with the white supremacy issues in the state of Mississippi, we won't have any justice. Mississippi Bureau of Investigation been dealing with more cases than Michael Jenkins. The only reason that Michael Jenkins' case and their officers were fired is because the Department of Justice stepped in.
That's right.
Do you hear me? The Department of Justice stepped in. So we need more accountability from Washington, D.C., Virginia, whomever deal with these issues to come into the state of Mississippi, because right now—
Okay, so let me ask a specific question.
Sir? What were you saying?
Okay, let me ask a specific question, and then Attorney Walker will off the answer to the Jackson media about Bailey's formal statement. Let me ask a specific question to Rankin County residents. Miss Mary Jenkins and Miss Monica Lee. Would you, I don't live in Rankin County. I've heard a lot about it, but I don't live there. Miss Jenkins and Miss Monica Lee, would you agree with Miss Priscilla's statement that white supremacists are infiltrated in the Rankin County Sheriff's? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that. It's not only Rankin County, it's officers, the judges, it's the district attorneys, and they go into, I believe it goes even further to Lynn Finch. You know, I think that it goes all the way to the top, because how can you have these many deaths and none has been prosecuted? It's always a reason. He had a gun. He had something on him. You know, it's always a reason. He tried to fight back. Okay, if you're running away from someone, how are you fighting back when you're shot in the back? These are things that are happening here in Mississippi, and of course, it's swept up under the rug. And you know why? Because the deputies, the sheriff, the judges, the district attorneys are all together. It's an unbreakable bond with them, and they feel comfortable. Don't you know, these deputies had to feel comfortable coming into this house and doing that to these two young men. They had to feel that they had backing, that they could do this and no consequences would follow it. You know, so if they knew that Brian Bailey would have retaliated against them, it never would have happened. But we see it happen. So that lets you know that it's from the ground up. Each person is protecting. Brian Bailey is protecting his deputies. The judges are protecting Brian Bailey. A district attorney is protecting Brian Bailey, and it goes all the way up. There are all in this bond that will not, the blue code is in Mississippi, and it's all over Mississippi. You'll never have justice until someone does something about it.
Excellent statement. Attorney Walker, I'm coming to you. So again, we say to Rankin County, the Rankin County supervisors and government structure, Rankin County has failed to enact policies to address police brutality, murder against its residents, particularly Black or African American. Rankin County never offered a policy of reform, a civilian review board, or any actions. Rankin County has tolerated a culture of bloodshed in its sheriff's department. It's bigger than Bailey. It's up to the county again, and that's why our lawsuit is, we call it the model for punitive damages, punishment, meaning that these outrageous acts and the suffering and the pain of Michael Jenkins addressed. That's compensatory damages. When we talk about punitive damages, we mean that a message must be sent that nothing like these terrible, torturous acts of terror must ever, ever occur anywhere in the United States of America ever again. Joke. This is about punitive damages, because if a message is not sent here, this could happen to anyone. I know that's a long answer to WBLT in Jackson, but Attorney Walker, the gentleman wanted to know, why was Brian Bailey's, what was your response to Brian Bailey's carefully worded statement?
Well, in the first place, I want to say that statement was probably written by the attorney for the sheriff's department as much as it was written by Brian Bailey, for starters. And secondly, one would notice that he took no questions. He just made the statement. So really, it was just a statement to announce that the officer had been fired and allegedly that they had taken some remedial measures with regard to what's been ongoing. But the fact of the matter is that everybody knows what's been happening there in Rankin County for a long time. I know for a fact that this is not the only time that officers have shown up with no warrant and conducted a raid. I know for a fact that I've discussed it with many other lawyers who practice criminal law in Rankin County, that they have abused and brutalized defendants. You know, I myself in more than one case have had to advise defendants, is your word against theirs. In terms of them hitting you or whatever, you just got to take an L and keep it moving. Let's deal with the legal issues that are in front of us, because it's a you versus them in terms of you're saying that, well, they hit me, they punched me, they kicked me. And that is a matter of fact in Rankin County. Everybody knows it. Attorneys that practice there know it. Citizens know it. And so for him to come out and say, hey, everything's okay now, we fired those officers, that's totally unsatisfactory. You know, the one person that Brian Bailey didn't fire that needed to fire is Brian Bailey. Because there's no way you can be the head, have these things go on up under you, and then expect that everything's supposed to be hunky-dory and you keep continuing business as usual. So who didn't get fired was Brian Bailey. That's what I got to say about that. And I hope that at least directly answers the question.
Okay. Okay, so our position here as we move on, I'd like to see Mr. Eddie Parker, if you could somehow sit him to the left of Mr. Michael Jenkins so we can get Mr. Eddie Parker here. He's very important. Mr. Eddie Parker has suffered a lot. Lucky he wasn't shot in the mouth, but he's been very important, courageous. So at this point, we're going to, where we reach this point is we're saying that we're demanding we have at minimum demanding the ouster of Brian Bailey as the sheriff. That's what we're saying collectively, that Bailey must go if Rankin County is even anywhere serious, and that criminal prosecution for state charges and federal charges is what consists of justice for us. Serious state and criminal charges all the way up to attempted murder, and enforcement of the James Byrd Hate Crimes Act. That is what we are fighting for. Mr. Eddie Parker is here. He's sitting right next to Michael Jenkins. I want to say that for standing up for the truth under tremendous pressure. These two young men are under tremendous scrutiny, tremendous pressure. They are even under pressure, honestly, for their lives in this hour. And I must state that this is why we're fighting. That Michael Jenkins would be a poster, like our beloved brother, Honorable Damian Cameron, who's gone from amongst us. We will be speaking of Michael Jenkins like Damian Cameron if there had not been divine intervention. Okay, so on July 5th, we must say this, on July 5th, Wednesday, from what I understand, that activists are going to confront Brian Bailey directly at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department, which is right near the big Confederate monument, from what I'm hearing. Mr. John Barnett, the great civil rights activist, are you on?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, you have, okay, before I say that, we are Attorney Trent Walker, we are constantly getting calls and emails from persons who have had violent encounters with Rankin County deputies. If they want to reach us, they can reach us by going to blackrightsmatter.org. Because now that we have stabilized our fight for Jenkins, Parker, and Damian Cameron, we have others that are calling in and we're looking through those cases. We have Mr. Klamikas. He tells us that earlier this year, right before this incident, that the Rankin County Sheriff's Department just walked up to him and knocked and busted all of his teeth out of his mouth simply for just telling him to move. And these things are coming forth. So I want to let you know that Black Lawyers for Justice, we're asking the Justice Department to open a pattern and practice investigation into Rankin County, and opened it up and concluded in Louisville, in Minneapolis, and Ferguson, Missouri. But we're asking them to open an investigation here. But our staff, we are investigating every false arrest, every beating, every killing. We are on our way to investigating all of that which has occurred over the last 5 years to 10 years in Rankin County. And they can reach us through blackrightsmatter.org. We will investigate your case in Rankin County if you've been abused by the police. But I heard on July 5th, Wednesday, that you're going to Rankin County. That sounds like a bold action, Mr. Barnett. Is that true?
That's correct. Yes, July 5th. I think it's imperative. Our organization has been blessed to get not only several officers fired, 25 to be exact, but 2 or 3 of those was chief of police. And in saying that, I think that Chief Bailey, this case is symbolic to, it's like someone eating pork all their life. You finally give them a vegan dish. They can't digest it. So even in his statement on yesterday, you still see a sense of him feeling sorry for the officers for now applying for new jobs today, hopefully at a temp service. So I think their head needs to go. When you look at corporate America, when sales are going down, they get rid of the CEO. They don't get rid of the employees, they get rid of the CEO. Chief Bailey is symbolic to that CEO, and he needs to be removed immediately. So on July 5th at 4 p.m., I think as part of direct action with civil rights, which is the 5th step, we need to consistently hit Mississippi with these particular exposures, because at the end of the day, he only admitted it because the Department of Justice stepped in. But I would not give all the credit to the Department of Justice, because they only highlight major cases. People are getting beat up across the country every day, every hour, in particular Black people. I want to thank Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, because this is symbolic to the civil rights movement. Because Dr. King went full-time in civil rights 7 days after Rosa Parks was not a seat on the bus. So it's the help of men standing up. And I'm asking for men, not the women. Women can come. But on July 5th, meet us in front of the Sheriff Department in Rankin County. And I'm asking for men in Mississippi. Now that you've been texting us saying, great job, I want y'all to piggyback off of that and show up on July 5th in front of that police department. We've gotten officers fired. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 officers. And we're looking for some more. Clean up the house and get rid of Bailey. He's number 7. He's the one that's hiding behind closed doors, and he only throwing them under the bus because he's trying to save his own job. I want all of these officers looking for employment on Monday morning, and we're going to make sure that that happens. And we have to be consistent. Give that exposure, provide that assistance, and stand up, men in Mississippi on July 5th at 4 p.m. And again, I want to thank Attorney Shabazz, because if it was not for you filing suit and Attorney Trent Walker as well, you all are our Dr. Kings. You're the only hope we have. Mississippi would not have this type of viral effect right now if it wasn't for those lawsuits and those lawyers such as yourself being put in place to penetrate this particular case. And I will say, in closing, that the $45 million and the $430+ million that America has spent on the souls of Black folks in this country, the $45 million last week that Benjamin Crump won, the $27 million for George Floyd, the $12 million, I went to Frankfort, Kentucky for Breonna Taylor, the $2 million in Charlotte for Jonathan Ferrell. The list goes on and on. Money cannot replace these souls that we've lost. So I hope that one day America wake up and realize they don't need to cut a check for Black lives. And I thank God that Michael Jenkins and Brother Eddie Parker's alive. Again, they could be a hashtag today, but God kept them alive for one reason, so that we could get justice in Mississippi and put something in place. If during COVID, they told us to put on masks. So I don't want us just to win this case and move on. Mississippi, put something in place. Department of Justice, put something in place, and let's be accountable for the actions of those deputies.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna let the press just finish their questions and we'll finish out. I do have something to say though, that we do believe that there's possibly a body cam video. It is true that these deputies turned off their body cams and conducted their actions, and then later, one that was on the scene turned his on. It's a serious allegation that we are all on top of, as well as the Department of Justice in this hour. Okay, and this is hearsay, but from what we're hearing, the video is worse than what we have described to you. But it's just what we've heard at this point. And we're not sure, but we believe that one amongst these deputies may be working in the cause of justice against the others. Maybe. We're not, but maybe. Any other questions? Because I think we've said enough today. And I thank you, Mr. Barnett, for Wednesday, July 5th. I think you said 4 p.m. where the activists are going to go into Rankin County. And God be with you. I know it's rough, but we thank you for taking a stand. Any other questions before we close out? Because we're going to close out at this time.
Hey, Mr. Shabazz, I just wanted to clarify, Richland, the city, right, in Rankin County?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Maybe. I want to be clear. It's an allegation.
And you said
we thank you all so much. The next time you should see us, I don't think you'll see us until the next time we should meet, should be around the subject of indictments. The next time we have this call or this news conference, we should be discussing the criminal charges that have been placed against these officers, either on the state level or the federal level. And soon, Attorney Walker and myself, we're going directly to Lynn Finch with our advocacy so that we can get her direct response on these matters. We thank you all so much. Thank you, Miss Mary Jenkins. Thank you, Honorable Miss Lee, Miss Monica Lee, who suffered much. Justice for Damian Cameron. Justice for Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. Thank you, Brother Markel Bridges, for fighting for Rasheen Carter, fighting for DeMonterio Gibson, fighting across the state. Thank you, Mr. John Barnett for fighting all across the country. Thank you for Miss Priscilla Williams-Till for protecting and advocating for this family. Thank you, Attorney Walker, for being a great man. And thank you, members of the press, for paying attention to these important matters. We thank you sincerely as we continue this fight on. Thank you for everyone who has helped in this matter. And God bless you, Mr. Eddie Parker and Mr. Michael Jenkins. Bless you, young men. And I'll talk to you soon. Bless you and keep your eyes open. Thank you.